Right, team, welcome back to the ADHD Entrepreneur. I'm your host, Jack Taylor. Now, we have a slightly different episode ahead of you today. We are celebrating our 150th episode. Now, that is a huge accomplishment for myself to be pumping these out for pretty much 150 weeks in a row. And I'm also really just like blown away by how much this has grown, especially since January this year. Like, we have tripled our listeners and we have a very highly engaged audience internationally. So I thank all of you for tuning in every week. For those of you that, follow, you like, you subscribe, you rate the podcast, all of those things like really go a lot further than you think they do, because that is what you put forward to get these bigger and better guests on. So that is obviously like a thanks to you guys for always listening in and staying engaged and giving me those little signals of interest so I can continue try and pour more of my time, energy, effort into giving you guys this value and getting other guests on as well to provide you with new perspectives. Now, today I want to run a different type of episode for you. Haven't done one of these before, so I'd be keen to hear your feedback. And if this is a format that you enjoy and that you get utility out of, then let me know on likely Instagram or LinkedIn or wherever you see me, and we can try and run these up more frequently. But we're going for more of a Q&A style, off the cuff episode today. So I haven't actually prepared anything for this podcast. Typically, I will prepare extensively for what I'm going to go through, but I spend all day, every day having conversations with my clients, and I find that that is actually when I am most in a state of flow, and that's a capacity that I enjoy. So assuming you guys get value out of this today, this is something I'll probably like to run up more frequently. So some of you may have seen, if you follow me on social media over the past couple of weeks, I've been putting posts out asking you guys to submit some questions for me to answer in today's episode. Now, I haven't actually seen any of these, so I thought it'd be interesting to get my lovely assistant to collate these and present them to me whilst I am recording this for you today. So I'm going to pull them up as we go through, and me answering these questions is going to be on the fly because I think it'll be interesting to see what comes up. So without further ado, let's get into this. So question one. I see your to-do list on your story and you run multiple businesses. How do you get so much done and actually follow through on it all? Great question. So critically, if we are working on multiple projects or we just have a few plates spinning at any one given time, which if you're in business, even if you're just in one vehicle, that's typically going to be the case, right? When you're a couple of years into business, which is the majority of the clients that I speak with on a daily basis as well, you hit a point in your business where everything always feels like it needs your attention. It always feels like you're busy and that you have like 5 to 10 different fires going on at any one given time. So with the question being, how do I get so much done and how do I actually follow through on it all? To be honest, this comes down to what I've learned over the past few years, which is installing certain systems around like how my brain actually works to ensure that I can really get that done. So to make this a little bit more tactical for you, one of the most important things that I do and that I guess I've changed over the last few years is the way that I approach my week. So on a macro basis, I used to subscribe, let's say, to the productivity advice, which is that I pretty much every single day in my calendar should be mapped out ahead of time and look pretty similar. So you kind of create like your perfect day template, and then each like Monday to Friday basically should look the same because that's the quote unquote optimal way of running a week. Now, I don't actually believe that to be true. So I've tested out multiple different ways of trying to like run my weekly architecture, as I call it. And I have found that what actually allows me to get the highest amount of output from my week is not time scheduling, but more like context bucketing and energy bucketing, those two things. So what's the difference between the two? Well, time blocking, let's call it, is the typical and traditional way that productivity advice is given to us to manage our time to be more organized, which is where you have some form of calendar system and you map out like the increments and the hourly increments, or it can be 15-minute increments of your day. And you're essentially mapping out exactly what you're going to be doing at each point throughout the day. Now, I have found for my brain type at least, and typically for a lot of my clients who have a similar brain type as well, that this doesn't work. And I've actually yet to meet anybody who has a similar brain to mine where they have seen success in this. And here's why I think that's the case. It's like traditional time blocking, we'll call it, is predicated on somebody's ability to be able to recognize how long a task takes ahead of time, because we're planning in tasks and allocating a amount of time to said task, and then being able to accurately recognize how much time has passed when they're doing the task so that they can stop doing the task and transition into the next thing. Those two things critically don't exist for someone like myself. Because if we look at like some of the challenges that do naturally come with this brain type, one of them is time blindness, object permanence. Now, I think time blindness is the key one here, where I don't have a great grasp on how long things are going to actually take me to do. So let's say, for example, I put a block of time allocated to a certain task at 9 till 10, mapped out the rest of my day accordingly in hour blocks. If I have anticipated that, let's say, creating this podcast episode was going to take me an hour, but in actuality, it takes me 2 hours, then my whole day has been ruined in relation to what I had planned. And I've just found then that it creates this domino effect of guilt that lands on my pillow at the end of the evening and actually breeds the opposite effect of what I want. So one of the biggest and best things that I've done is move away from that and move towards like context bucketing, which means that, and this can look different for so many different people, right? And this is quite a bespoke process. So I'll give you like the principles as to how I think through this. And then you can try and map this out for yourself. So I have essentially tried to identify, with all the things that I need to do in a week, can I put them into similar contexts? So if I look at the things that I do in my week, right, I have got content creation as being one of them. I have got coaching as being another one. I have got kind of discovery calls as being another one, right? So we can start to see that like I've got a coaching conversation and I've got a discovery call. They are two separate functions of my business. One is delivery, the other is sales. However, they are both very similar contexts and they require me to wear what I would say is like the same hat. Does that make sense? So I wear the same hat for coaching and a sales conversation, whereas I would wear a different hat if I am writing an email or doing admin or like replying to messages. So we can see that they are different contexts because I have to be in a different headspace for each of those tasks. So I basically map out all of the things that are required from me in all of my businesses across the week. And then I look at, okay, well, can I bunch these into context? And when I can, I then try to map my days out as like context-based days. So I have Friday, for example, as my media day. So Friday is a day where I stay all my businesses in the same headspace, which is the creation of content. So that means that I can really like put out a big block of time with no distractions and no context switching that is dedicated to a single context. So that's one of the biggest things that has made a huge impact to my ability to get such a high amount of output done. If I've, rewind back a couple of years, there's not a chance in hell that like if you would have told me that you'd be running 3 businesses like 2 years from now that I would have believed you because I struggle to run one. And as I say, like there are a number of different factors that help me to do that, but one of them is my ability to restructure how I run my weeks and make sure that I have an adequate amount of time allocated to the responsibilities that I have to upkeep to create the life and the business results that I want. But more importantly, to make sure that I'm mapping almost like the order of that out throughout my week in the right way so that I'm not hemorrhaging kind of focus and time. So that's kind of one of the biggest things that I would say I have taken and learned over the past couple of years. Now, question 2, how do you tell the difference between a distraction and something actually worth your time and energy? Great question. And this is actually very relevant to a topic that I covered at our first Hunter Brain in-person mastermind, which was about 2 or 3 Saturdays ago. I literally covered this topic. So one of the best things that I've learned in business is something called the theory of constraints. And I actually made an episode about this. Maybe it was the last episode. So episode 149, so the one before this, which is helping us to identify like what is actually the constraint that is stopping me from getting the result that I want in my business right now. Because there are always going to be multiple constraints, but we want to try and identify the constraint that is closest to the tap, is how I describe it, which is what is the constraint? If you think of your business like a system, right? A system, there is a start and there is an end. So the start of a system is where we basically push something through and we have throughputs within a system. And then we have the end. So the way I like to visualize this is you've got a tap, you've got water coming out of the tap, that's the start, and it goes into a pipe. And then you have the whole pipe itself, which is the kind of whole journey of your business and the whole function of your business. And at the other end of the pipe, you then have a bucket. Now, the result that we want is to get water from the tap into the bucket. Now, there are going to be many constraints and let's say blockages within this pipe, i.e. your business, problems that need to be solved. Now, how do I identify which problem is worth me solving right now? Well, the question then is, which is the constraint that is closest to the tap? And which is the biggest constraint, which is stopping the largest amount of throughput within my business right now? That is one of the most critical skills that we can learn as a business owner, because I see so many people who have this long to-do list of things to do ultimately inside of their business because they're treating their business like a large to-do list rather than an actual kind of system and a pipeline almost. And it's then very difficult for them to be able to discern what actually requires their attention and what doesn't, because they are all pretty valid if you hold them up next to each other. They are all objectively problems that we want to solve at some point. When is that point? And what is the order of prioritization? That is going to be the determining factor of how quickly you are able to overcome and solve problems, and thus your business is able to grow. So once I have been able to very clearly identify what the constraint is of my business, i.e., the thing that if it was to be solved would, like if it was the one thing that I could solve would cause the most amount of relief to everything else downstream in my business, like that is typically the constraint that we need to focus on. Once I've been able to identify that, when I then get presented with something to do, let's say, and I'm then asking myself the question of, is this a distraction or is this something that's actually worth my time and my energy, bringing it back to the question, I am then able to hold it up to the constraint. Is this thing that I'm about to do, or I'm at least considering to do, going to solve the current constraint of my business? If the answer is no, then I put it into what's called a parking lot, because it may still be a good and valid idea for the future, just not for now. So I will capture it, but I will put it in, as I say, what I call a parking lot, so that I don't have this angst around, I'm going to forget it, so I need to action it now. It lives somewhere that I have access to, so that anxiety can dissipate, but I don't need to take action on it now, because I have made a commitment that my time, energy, and attention needs to be directed towards one thing, which is solving my business's constraint right now. So I'm not scattered. I'm not optimizing everything in my business by 5%. I'm putting all of my energy, my attention, and my resources to solving the number one constraint inside of my business. But the only way you're able to answer that question as to whether something is a distraction or something that's actually worth your time and energy is if you know what your constraint is inside your business, because otherwise you are guessing. We need some form of criteria to be able to tell us whether this is the right or wrong move. Because again, if you know that constraint, you're able to hold up the seemingly distraction or the distraction at hand and go, does this take me closer to or further away from this constraint being solved? If it's further away or indifferent, park it. If it's closer to, then you've provided evidence that it is therefore not a distraction and it has utility in the problem that you're trying to solve at hand. So hopefully that helps. Question number 3. How do you avoid decision paralysis? There is a great framework that I'm pretty certain it was Jeff Bezos talks about with his team. And it is called, I believe, type 1 or type 2 doors. Now, the theory is this. A type 1 door is a door that you can go through the door, walk into a room, and if for whatever reason you go into the room and you don't like it, you can turn back around and walk back through the door. So that is what we call a type 1 decision, right? Where if for whatever reason you make the decision and it turns out that it wasn't the right decision, now that you have more information, no bother. You can turn around and you can come back and you will find yourself in the same position where you are right now, minus the time that is spent to go through the door. We then have type 2 doors, which are the type of decisions that once you walk through the door and you go into said room, you cannot turn around and walk back. This is a one-way door. Now, the reality is that 99% of the decisions that we need to be making and that we get paralyzed over are type 1 doors, but we conflate them for type 2 doors. So again, it's like when we have this as a framework and you're able to quickly identify, is this a type 1 door or is this a type 2 door? It then gives you permission to make decisions faster because you're less fearful of making the wrong decision when you understand that even if you do make the wrong decision, you're able to walk back through that door and you'll find yourself in a very similar position to where you are right now. There are very few decisions that you'll ever have to make in your life or in your business that are type 2 doors. Type 2 doors, to just give you an actual example of one, would be having a child. Once you've had a child, you can't unhave a child. Killing someone. Once you've killed someone, you can't unkill someone. These are dramatic examples. However, you get the point. These are the irreversible decisions. Changing your offer is a type 1 door, because if you change your offer and for whatever reason the marketplace don't buy, you can change your offer back very quickly and be very agile as a result. And within a very short period of time, you'll be back to where you are right now. So that gives you an example as to the difference between a type 1 door and a type 2 door. And that really, as like a mental framework, helps me to make decisions quicker, get like less in my head when it comes to making decisions. Because I'll very simply, like this happens very quick for me now, be like, okay, cool, I have these decisions that I need to make. Is it type 1 or type 2? If it's a type 1, it's like I make the decision by the end of the day. If it is a type 2 door, however, because some are like to sell the business or not to sell the business, that is a type 2 door. That requires all of the stakeholders that are going to be affected by this decision to come together to put a deadline of when this decision needs to be made by, which could be a couple of weeks, could be a couple of months. And you all need to do whatever is required and have as many meetings as required prior to that deadline to gather as much information as possible to make an informed decision. but there needs to be a deadline. Otherwise, the decision will never be made. And that is why, like, whenever it comes to a decision, if you have this brain type, you need to put a deadline on when the decision needs to be made. So type 1 doors, for me, 24 hours max, right? Type 2 doors, to be honest, I'm yet to find a type 2 door, especially in business, that I encountered. So that's my process for avoiding decision paralysis. Question 4. I know what I need to do, I just don't do it. What's actually going on here? Haha. This was something that I struggled with for a long time. And to be honest, this is what I verbalized to myself for a long time as I was frustrated. And one of the things I had to call out very directly to myself is that I am trying to excuse the wrong problem. And what I mean by that is knowing what to do and not knowing what to do. That comes down to, do I have a knowledge problem or do I not have a knowledge problem? But doing it and not doing it very rarely has anything to do with knowledge. It has something to do with execution. So we're getting these two things conflated. I know what I need to do. Cool. That means you do not have a knowledge problem. I am not doing it. Thus, you have an execution problem. And we call this with my clients the knowledge execution gap. So this is something that people often are frustrated by, is that sentence. It's like, I know what I need to do, I just don't do it. And it is because when we are struggling to do the thing that we believe we should be doing, our go-to knee-jerk reaction is to go and learn more and to go and obtain more information. And I did this for ages. Like, there were certain things that I knew I should be doing inside of my business to get my business to grow, and I wasn't doing them. So I was getting frustrated that my business wasn't growing. And I thought the answer to that was to go and learn more stuff. I paid like over 100K on business consultancy and help and mentorship and books and whatever, right? So much money to try and obtain more knowledge. And then there came a point where no matter how much knowledge I consumed, I still wasn't doing the stuff. And that's when I had to have this long, like, hard conversation with myself where I was like, cool, knowledge is not the issue. Execution is the issue. So I'm trying to solve the wrong problem. If I'm not doing the thing I know I should be doing, buying another book, listening to another podcast, or whatever it may be, is not the answer. It is really dialing down on what are the things that are stopping me from executing on the knowledge that I already possess. And typically that comes down to a myriad of different things, but one of them can be not having the right systems in place, not actually being in the right environment to do the right tasks, and having too much friction to do a task that we know we should be doing. So as a rule of thumb, any task that you want to avoid doing, add friction to the process. I am a slut for chocolate digestive biscuits. I know they're not great for me. So how do I avoid stuffing my face with chocolate digestive biscuits, which I know I would do if they were in front of me and there was no friction there? I don't have them in the house. So that is adding friction. So if I'm sat here now because I'm ruminating on chocolate digestive biscuits and I was like, oh, I'd love one, I have to pause this podcast, go and get in my car, go and drive to the shop, get out of my car, go and interact with people at the co-op, come back, open them and eat them. Like, there's quite a few steps that are required for me to do the thing. Through that process of friction, I will likely determine that this is probably not worth my time and it's probably not the best decision. Now, the same is true the other way around. If there are things that I know I need to be doing to grow my business or to better myself, I need to remove as much friction as humanly possible to increase the likelihood that I will do what I know I need to do. The example of this is, if I know that I should be taking, let's say, supplements more frequently, then I need to put them in my eyesight. I need to make it so that it is the most frictionless process possible to do the behavior that I know I should be doing. If, let's say, I was taking supplements or medication or whatever it is, something that is good for me, and I had to go downstairs, go in the cupboard, go and get some water, like do all of these things. They are all steps of friction that are in between what I know I should do and actually going and doing it. So the TLDR is remove as much friction as humanly possible from the things that you know you should be doing and actually going and doing them. Don't get it conflated with trying to solve an execution problem with more knowledge. Question number 5. What is your wind down method before bed and after a long day of work? Great question. Again, this is something that myself and my clients work on extensively and pretty early inside of the momentum sprint. One of the reasons being is that, like, I've always found it really difficult to switch off. I also recognize that for a lot of people and a lot of my clients, as they come through, they struggle with sleep. I think this is naturally just something with this brain type for obvious reasons. Our brains are incredibly active. We spend a lot of time in our default mode network. So like, we try and keep ourselves stimulated all day. And then the least amount of stimulation we get in a day is when we're laying on that pillow. So what happens if we don't have external stimulation is that our brains, because they're still so heavily stimulated because we've not done anything to kind of unwind them, are going crazy. And that's what keeps us up. And for me, like that was a real big problem for a number of years, to the point where I genuinely thought that I was an insomniac because I struggled to sleep so bad. So I am very anal around my evening routine, and it doesn't have to be this big, long, convoluted process. We just need to figure out, like, for you, the listener, like, what is the purpose of an evening routine? The purpose of an evening routine is to essentially regulate your nervous system, which in turn is going to quieten down the chatter and the incessant thought patterns that your mind is naturally going to find itself in if you don't do that. So my whole, let's call it evening routine or bedtime routine, wind down method is designed around that outcome. Okay, so if I'm trying to downregulate my nervous system and calm my mind down before I go to bed to get it into a conducive state for sleep, I need to reverse engineer, like, what are the things that are likely going to do that? Well, for me, how this looks is I remove myself from, as best as possible, as much artificial light as I can. I don't have any blue screens that enter my bedroom. So my phone stays in my office. My phone never goes into my bedroom. We don't have a TV in my bedroom. I don't ever go on my laptop in my bedroom. I've created an association that my bedroom is for sleeping. So I really downregulate the amount of light that I get to that latest 30 minutes before I'm intending to go to sleep. I then have a process that works for me, which is the daily debrief. This is a very short practice that I do with pen and paper in my notepad before I go to bed, and is anchored to me getting into bed, where I just reflect on the biggest wins for the day. I have to give myself a minimum of three. It doesn't actually matter how big or small they are. I just need to point at something that is positive that's happened for the day. Again, that gets me in a nice headspace. I then have a space for reflections. One of the biggest reasons as to why I personally struggle to sleep is because I have so many things that start whirring around in my head when I hit the pillow, for the reason I gave you earlier. I am no longer externally stimulated. So when I lay down, my brain starts presenting to me all of these great ideas, all these problems that need to be solved. Or, have you remembered to do that thing yesterday or today or whatever it is? And if I don't get those out of my head, then they're going to keep me awake. So I then have a section in my daily debrief, which is just reflections. So whatever is in my brain, I do a process called the stream of consciousness, where I just purge it out of my head. It doesn't need to be coherent. It doesn't need to be kind of formatted. I'm not writing a dear diary. I'm literally just allowing whatever thought comes into my mind to be purged out onto paper. And that gives me personally a ton of relief, knowing that no matter what is on that page or whatever is in my head, tomorrow morning I'm going to wake up and I'm going to have access to it still. So it literally feels like I am taking the thought out of my head and I'm putting it onto paper, and it is relinquished from my mind. And then critically, what I do, which also for me personally just alleviates any form of anxiety and inertia around tomorrow, is I just plan out my kill list for tomorrow. So I just write down, like, what are the big three that I want to get done for tomorrow. And again, that helps me tomorrow. Like, there's a double up benefit. Wake up with very little inertia, not having to kind of waste cognitive bandwidth by thinking, what do I need to do today when I'm already in the day? I just can get to work and I can just get to optimizing for momentum. So that, very simply, alongside sleeping with spa music, that's something that we do, and having candles on and no artificial light, that is simply the very easy and non-convoluted 2 or 3 step routine that I have for winding down in the evening. Question 6, what's something you're still rubbish at despite doing this for years? Interesting. I'll give you the answer that I gave to my barber this morning. So we were actually in a conversation around this. It's not necessarily something that I am rubbish at in relation to kind of systems, productivity, like business, whatever we want to call it. But it's something that I'm personally navigating at the moment. It's something that I'm bringing more conscious attention to, and it's obviously front of mind for me because I was discussing it this morning. It is the ability to actually reward myself for the work that I do. So I am sure many of you will relate and resonate with this. I have very little problem in rewarding and celebrating and gifting things to those around me. In fact, I willingly do it because I get a lot out of it. Like, I love the ability of, like, taking my family out for dinner, paying for holidays for my partner, like all of these things, right? I really get a kick out of it. But I really struggle to do the same for myself. And that's something that I've wrestled with for a long time. And I am working through that at present because I recognize that there's still a blocker there for me to kind of acknowledge and celebrate, like, my successes. For example, the podcast, we're at 150 episodes. The podcast has grown significantly. The Hunter Brain business, the coaching consultancy and advisory business that we run for ADHD founders, that has grown tremendously over the past, like, 12 to 18 months, like better than any of the businesses that I've had over the past 8 years. And I still have that difficulty in being able to allow myself not necessarily to feel the success of that because I feel it, but to reward myself, essentially. Like, again, just total transparency. This is a little moment between me and you as the listener. I want to buy myself a new car because we're going away to Europe next year. And I find it really difficult to feel like I have earned the right to buy myself that car. And I know that it's nonsensical. And I know that there is no right or wrong answer as to when have you deserved to buy yourself the car or not. So that's something that I'm still like working on and through at the moment. And it's definitely got better. And a way that I'm kind of combating this is actually making kind of conditions and rules around this. So the way that I run my business now, which is a little kind of tidbit and side note, this has been like super helpful for me, is I don't really set like year goals or 6 month goals or anything like that. I set quarterly goals. So I give myself a quarterly direction, a quarterly target that I need to basically work on in relation to solving the biggest constraint inside of my business. And then I critically chunk that down into what we call a 6 week hunt. So that is a sprint. Reason being is that our brains need urgency in order to create dopamine, which then obviously gets our brains into gear. So I work much better on a 6 week sprint than a 6 month marathon. So what I've started to do with myself, and I'm incorporating this with clients now and it's working very effectively, is that when I've established what the 6 week hunt is that I am basically aiming for, so let's say it's, I don't know, add 10 clients or 10K or whatever, right? Once I've set that target, then need to establish like what the 1 to 2 projects that I need to complete in that hunt in order to drive that result. Once I've established that, I do two things. I create stakes. Stake one is, what do I get when I achieve the thing? And this can be a myriad of different things for each individual. It can be a experience, a trip, a toy. It can be something like this, right? What what are you going to almost like commit to yourself that you're going to allow yourself to enjoy as a result of you completing the sprint? And on the other side, I also have a consequence, which is if I don't do the thing, what's the consequence of that? And that can be something that I don't like doing. That can be for some people, like I've actually ran this with a client before, and it was to give to a charity that they don't believe in or something like that, which like really just created this emotional fire inside of them to make sure that didn't happen. Another one was that if they didn't do it, and they opted for this, if they didn't achieve the thing, they were going to send me $1,000. I'm not going to say I was trying to sabotage their progress, but no, but in all seriousness, like we want to create stakes. So in doing so, like that's just a way that I'm trying to almost give myself permission to overcome that challenge that I'm experiencing, is by creating rules essentially with myself. Is that if I complete the sprint in a time frame that I've set, I essentially need to go and reward myself with this. And likewise, to encourage the likelihood of the success, I set myself a consequence, which would likely be signing up for a marathon or something like that. So that's what I'm struggling with still at present that I'm working on. And final question, was there a moment things actually clicked for you, or was it a slow process? A mixture of both. I would say there was initially like a penny drop moment internally for me where things shifted, as like my paradigm was shifted incredibly quickly. And then for that to then be reflected and show up in my external environment, that was a slower process. So the moment of which my total kind of paradigm of the world and my view of self shifted was when I finally understood that every result that I got from my life was not a me problem, it was a system problem. So it was helping me to shift the blame from being like, what the fuck is wrong with me? Why am I getting these results in my business? Why do I constantly feel this way? Why am I getting these results with my relationship? Why do these patterns keep repeating themselves? Instead of pointing the blame at self and being like, I need to change myself, or there is inherently a problem wrong with me, I was able to detach it from self, and I was able to reflect on the system that I'm currently operating in to drive a certain result is not working. It is not giving me the result that I want. Thus, the system needs to change as opposed to me needing to change. Now, that doesn't mean that there's nothing about me that needed to change. Like my behaviors needed to change and I needed to create a new system, but it meant that there was nothing inherently wrong with me as an individual. And when I had that kind of epiphany moment, totally transformed the relationship I have with myself and how I view the world. That then obviously changed my behaviors, and downstream, things started to slowly change in my life, in my business, as a result of a lagging effect of the new behaviors and approach that I was taking. So yeah, the biggest moment that caused this internal shift for me was recognizing that there was never anything wrong with my brain and me. And the reason I was not getting the results that I wanted from my life was because there was a system error, not a me error. Hopefully you enjoyed that one today, guys. Kind of went here, there, and everywhere with this. If you did, please let me know. And as always, I appreciate you listening. I appreciate you checking in every week. And if you haven't done so yet, please like, subscribe, rate, whatever platform you're listening to this on. And I will do my best to continue showing up for you guys and giving you the knowledge that I'm learning, telling you what works, what doesn't, show you behind the scenes of my business, my life, and what's going on for my clients. And as always, smash it. And until next time, I appreciate you all, and I'll catch you on the next one.